Welcome everybody, my name is Jessica Martin and I'm delighted today to be sharing some tools and tips on time management, which is all about prioritisation and planning. So let's kick straight off. So agenda for this session is about going through the definition of time management. So we'll look at what that actually means. We will talk a bit about why time management is a challenge for many of us. And we're going to talk about two simple tools that can really help and make a difference. Just by way as a bit of background and an introduction to who I am, as I've said, my name is Jessica Martin and I'm now an experienced business and executive coach. I'm also a qualified NLP practitioner, but my background is in the food industry. I was an industry marketeer in FMCGs for over 20 years, so I really understand firsthand the challenges that are facing professionals today in the FMCG industry. I worked on some of the UK's famous brands, including Jacobs, Jaffa Cakes, Heinz salad cream, all sausages, even Unilever's Lipton tea. And I was famous for trebling the value of Jacobs crackers, so the RSV. And as I moved into coaching, it was because I'm not only passionate about profit, but I'm also passionate about people. In my role as an executive coach now, I do help others to achieve their objectives, set manageable milestones, create powerful action plans, and maintain their motivation. For me, I'm really passionate about doing this. And the reason is, when I started my career, I didn't have any tips about time management. It was all about the functional expertise, how to grow the profit of these brands and how to manage the annual brand plan and execute it. And whilst I love that part of the job, oh, how I wish that I had been taught some tips on time management. For me, I often ended up staying very late into the evening to get my to-do list done. And I did that for a long time, quite honestly, until I had children. So I'm here today because I don't want you to have to learn the hard way like I did. So hopefully some of the tips that we'll share today will really help you set you on the right path for your career journey. So let's move on and think about the definition of time management. So I've put a couple of definitions in here today. So the one from the dictionary says, time management is the ability to use one's time effectively or productively, and especially at work. And then the second one, which comes from mindtools.com, time management is the process of organising and planning how to divide your time between specific activities. And good time management enables you to work smarter, not harder, so that you get more done in less time, even when time is tight and the pressures are high. Hopefully those two will resonate with you, and especially in terms of what you're hoping to get out of today's session. So really, time management is the key to being able to work efficiently. If we move on and think about why time management is a challenge for many of us, well, really, there is never enough time, is there? It's a finite resource. When it's gone, it's gone. This isn't a new insight, but actually the pace of life and the demands on our time have gotten worse and are probably only going to continue to get worse. Two thoughts here. Time is a scarcer resource than money. Yet, even as money management products proliferate and the tools that we have to manage our time, such as the calendar and to-do lists, well, they haven't really changed much in the last century, so we haven't really got the right tools to keep up with the pace of change. Another reason is time is harder to manage than money. For one thing, it's a perishable resource. There is no bank for time. You can't stretch it, you can't grow it, you can't get any more of it. But the challenges actually run deeper than this. So if we want to understand what tools are needed in the hectic 21st century, we really need to understand the challenges first. So let's look at 5 of them. So firstly, for many, it's not obvious what's important. Your preferences aren't always obvious to you. How do you trade off finishing that report with going to that early evening gig that you might have with friends? And said more simply, you often don't know what it is you really want. How can you optimize decision making if it's not clear what you're optimizing for? There are just too many things to consider. Even if you did know the value of every action you take, there's just too much going on. Think of all the things that are vying for your time: work meetings, social engagements, family, errands, hobbies, health appointments. Well, first, it's hard to remember them all, along with the various constraints and preferences that you have. But suppose that all these were laid out clearly in front of you with nothing escaping your attention. You'd have what computer scientists call an intractable computational problem. And that means simply that there's no algorithm that can quickly determine how best to allocate your time. So what we're saying here, What's hard for computers is pretty much impossible for people. This is difficult. The third reason time management is a challenge is other people want your time. You're not the only one who wants to spend this currency that's called your time. Others want to spend it for you. Just look at your calendar and see how much of it is taken up by meetings initiated by others, for example. And the problem is that our psychology and our social norms make it really hard to say no. Also, we're human. We constantly mismanage our time. We procrastinate, we go for the fleeting, immediate gratification of checking off a bunch of easy tasks, and we let the critical hard tasks languish. We spend valuable high productivity periods on mindless emailing. Also, we make mistakes. And lastly, technology has made things worse. And this is ironic. Technology has exacerbated several of the problems. Laptops and mobile phones allow us to do things at more times and more places than ever before, meaning there are even more possible activities to consider when deciding how to spend our time. And perhaps more acutely, technology increases the social pressure on our time, since other people can reach us almost any time or any place. So just while we've got all that food for thought, here's an invitation for some interaction and get engaged in a poll. So what we're going to do is put a poll on the screen and ask which of those 5 reasons that you've just heard about resonate with you. And you can tick any and all that apply. So if there's more than one of those you think, gosh, I really get that, that is what definitely happens to me, I understand that, put a tick next to more than one of them. And what we'll do is we'll wait just for a few seconds for some of the responses to come in, and then we'll just have a look and put that on the screen and see which things are really making an impact with you. So thank you so much. You can see all your clicks and responses coming in now, which is fantastic. So just give that a couple more seconds. If you haven't clicked on it yet, do put down what resonates with you. Which ones of those do you think are the real reasons for you while time management is a challenge? Great, so we'll put that up on the screen, and we've got 68% voting for too many things to consider. So there's just too much on our plates. And coming in a close second at 57% is other people want my time. And that really is a challenge, isn't it, in our early careers? So thank you so much for participating in that. Let's move on. So what can we really do about this, all these challenges? And what does this tell us about time management tools for the 21st century? Well, I'm really sorry to tell you, but there is no silver bullet. Since the underlying cause is not about to disappear, the pressure on our time will likely not abate soon. So we really do need to find some tools that are equipped for the 21st century. And we need things that will help us optimize our priorities so that making the decisions is not so hard. Tools should really help us realize our own preferences, as we were talking about how to spend our time, and if only by encouraging us to pay attention to them. These tools need to be flexible to accommodate the different dynamics of life, and tools should allow us to be responsibly social and encourage us to provide our time with the protection it requires. Tools should nudge us to do the right thing, mitigating our sometimes counterproductive tendencies. And if they do all of this, technology will once again be our ally in our most important quest in life, which is spending time on what really matters to us. So a lighter thought on the next slide. Time management is about doing the right things, not just doing things right. So have a think about that. You may be chopping down trees, but are you even in the right forest in the first place? Just have a think about what that means. Time management, doing the right things, not just doing things right. And we'll come back to that a bit later. So another opportunity to have a poll in a moment and see which of these resonates with you. So what does the result of poor time management look like? How does it manifest itself in behaviours? So these are 5 things that you might either see in yourself or see in others around you. So the first one being procrastination, putting off work to the last minute. We all procrastinate to a greater or lesser degree, and at some points in our lives. I've never met anyone that doesn't. Displacement, and this is filling our time with less difficult or easier tasks. So that's ticking off all those easy things on the to-do list before tackling that big thing that you really don't want to do. Another thing that might be visible is staying late, and I talked about that being my visible behaviour when I was not so good at managing my time in my early career. Also, poor evidence or poor judgment about an ability to prioritise and plan time effectively, so making bad decisions about what needs doing. Sometimes we see that in ourselves or those around us. And finally, failure to achieve objectives, so project milestones or longer term or more strategic objectives. So again, let's just have a think, and I'm going to ask you which of these things resonate with you. And this time, just vote for one of those 5 things. And this could be what you might see in yourself or what you might see in others. And just to reassure you, it's completely anonymous. So it's just literally collecting anonymous feedback just to see which of those actually resonates. It's fantastic to have that opportunity when we've got so many on the call. So just going through procrastination, displacement, so putting things off and doing other things in their place, staying late, poor judgment on priorities, and a failure to achieve longer term objectives. Which of those look like behaviours that evidence either in yourself or in others around you? You can see all the results coming in, which is fantastic. So working out the software, which is brilliant. So what have we got as a result there? So procrastination comes out as by far the top one, which I think I'd agree with for myself as well. So that's great. And then displacement, so just doing other things in their place, is a close second. Staying late, a close third. Poor judgment, 4, and then failure to achieve objectives. So actually that's good news that actually lots of people are achieving their objectives. So brilliant, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for feeding back on that. Right, what we'll do now is move on to the second half of my section, which is going to be about looking at 2 tools which will help with time management. So let's get into the positive and constructive parts now. So the first tool is called the Eisenhower matrix, and it's called that because an ex-US president called Dwight D. Eisenhower made this phrase. He said, "I have 2 kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important, and the important are never urgent." And the learning of this is that urgent and important are often not the same thing. So what he did is he put these into a simple 4-box matrix, and he defined what type of work fits into each of these boxes. And we'll go through them. And it's possible for you to classify your work into these 4 boxes as well, which is what you will be encouraged to do as a learning from this webinar today. So if we look at the first box, which is urgent and important, that's headed crisis management. This is stuff that is going to get done because people are shouting for it. There's a big consequence if it doesn't happen right now. Pressing problems, things that are deadline driven, projects, anything that comes in that's unexpected, that is likely to happen. That's defined as the urgent and the important. Looking at the second quadrant, so things that are important but not urgent. This is quality, often thinking, planning type work. Things that are prevention related, so preventing things happening in the future, building relationships with others, thinking about and planning for new opportunities, anything that's improvement work, and of course your own personal development is really important. All fits in this box. Super important, but of course none of that is urgent. They won't be deadline driven, well, not until they get to the last minute anyway. So they do need thinking about earlier on, and we'll come back and we'll think about how to divide our time. Then we move on to box 3, which is work that is urgent, but actually it's not important. So actually this is deception. This is work that may appear to be urgent. Appear to be important, but it really isn't. This is when you get interrupted by people, by phone calls, by emails, things that might need doing, other people's meetings that you get invited to, and people say it's really, really urgent, you need to come to this. Writing and doing things on to-do lists which look urgent, but actually they're really not, and so they're deceiving. And then the last box is wasteful. It's not urgent and it's not important. So what type of things might this be that you're spending your time doing? Trivial activities, busy work, and you'll hear this phrase again probably in your careers. Work that makes you look busy. You think you're busy, but actually what you're doing is neither urgent nor important. Nobody's asked for it, and it's not deadline driven, and it's not business critical. So actually it's time wasting. Irrelevant emails can distract time. So there'll be emails that come from mailing lists and circulars, and they waste time. There'll be phone calls that waste time. Escape activities, Googling. How often do you go researching something, maybe a competitor or something online that you think, I'll go and look at that, and next thing you know, you've clicked on several more buttons and you find that you're examining the rivers in India from north to south. I think we've all got lost down a rabbit hole of clicking on the internet and various things that we then go, my gosh, I've lost 2 hours. How did that happen? And we pull that back and we realize that's a waste of time. That's when you've been in box 4. Gossip. And nobody's saying never do any of this, because sometimes it's brain release work and it's relaxing. What we're saying is be aware of it in the first instance and where it fits in to what you do. So moving on to actually how we should spend our time. So what's the recommendations here? What we should do with all this? So once you've worked out your own to-do list and you've put it into these 4 boxes and gone, my goodness, I've got quite a lot in box 2, that's quality work and I really need to start thinking about when I'm going to do this. How does this happen? So first of all, the stuff in box 1, urgent and important, will always happen. It's the crisis stuff. So in a way, you don't need to worry about it. You will notice it. It's going to happen. What you need to do is not allow it to take over your whole week and your whole diary. The challenge then is to plan for box 2 and actually think about what needs to happen and when it needs to happen. And planning is the key word there. In box 3, the work that is urgent but not important, so it is deceiving you by looking like it's important, this needs to somehow be delegated or said no to. So this means moving it outwards, upwards if you're junior and there's nobody it can go down to. Delegate in the broadest sense of the word means push it outwards to others, agency, colleagues, suppliers. Where can it go? And we're going to come on and talk about actually ways to say no shortly. And then box 4, I mean, this is quite simply avoid it as much as possible. It's wasteful. We'll look at now some recommendations for how to split time. So I've been asked this before. Well, actually, once I've got all of this, excellent, what do I do with it? How do I know how much of my time I should spend in each box? Well, the recommendation is to spend 30% of your time and no more on the crisis management, because what you want to do is allow for a big chunk of planning and thinking time. This work is such high quality. It is the work that will drive the efficiency in the role that you do and eliminate repeated problems. It will deliver relationships that will help to solve problems and the crises that come in future. This is the recommendation, to spend more than half of our time in the work that fits into box 2. We're not saying never do the deception work, so the urgent but not important, but this is minimize it to 10%. And of course, ideally, don't spend any time in the wasteful box if you can. So this really connects back to that forest and the trees analogy that we were talking about earlier. So it's not just doing things right, but it's make sure you're doing the right things in the first place. So your right things should be the things that feature in that second box. Are you even working on the right things in the first place before you start working out whether you're doing them right? Right, if we haven't befuddled you enough by this point, let's move on to then, what do you do with this? So once I've got my lists and I've got my boxes and they're all nicely tidied up, what do I do with it? So this is the second tool that you can use. And this is actually taking those boxes and overlaying them onto a calendar. And this is an example calendar that might be your calendar for next week. And hopefully, before you move into the week, all of your time is not completely consumed. If it is already, do you know what? Start with a week that looks a bit more like this and start from that point and go, okay, so where I've got a week with some gaps in, this is how I could overlay the Eisenhower urgent and important matrix onto my diary. So what we'll do is we will take your to-do list that's in that matrix and we'll overlay it onto the diary, and we will start with box 1. So starting with anything that looks like crisis work and is urgent. Do you know what? That's probably already in your diary. This is probably the things that are there. It could be your weekly team meetings and any preparation you need to do for that, because that will bring up and highlight any of the urgent things that need to happen that week. It'll be your one-to-one with your line manager and any project meetings perhaps that are in your diary already. And it might be actually, as you think about that, do you know what? At the beginning of most days, I have a whole load of reactive stuff that I just need to do. And so I probably need to allow for some time for that. So I'll be realistic about where that urgent and important work fits into my diary. And this is where it then gets interesting. So what you then do with box 2 is think about, okay, so what's in there that I really need to plan for? So this is important and not urgent. No one else is going to put this in my diary. I need to allow the time for it. So you take that and you look at your diary, and you figure out where the best slots are for you to do some of this work. And it might be, for example, on here that you've been given a big objective that's got a long-term planning need for it, and actually you need to really think about it, and you may block out a big chunk of time, such as half a day, that works for you. And of course, thinking about things like personal development. And it's a chunky and it's a difficult thing to do. So being honest again with yourself, when's the best time of the week for me? When is the best time of the day? Maybe I wait until some of the crises are out of the way on Monday and Tuesday, and actually I put some of this thinking and planning work into the back end of the week, and also some of it earlier in the day when I'm feeling a bit fresher. So you put some green boxes around that, and there might be some relationship building things that go in there as well. So some short meetings with cross-functional team members. So hopefully that's starting to make sense so far, and you can see that we're layering your diary rather than leaving big gaps and allowing other people to put things in or planning it 9 to 5 in order. This is a layering effect. And it could be, of course, when you think about your personal development, this is where Fast Track fits in. And planning the time to listen to the webinars and do the pieces of work that will take you forward to getting the certificates at the end. And then lastly, thinking about both of these boxes together. So what fits in here? The urgent but not important, and the wasteful activities that really aren't urgent or important at all. Where do they fit? And again, being realistic. No one's saying there's not going to be any time for that. And certainly if you're in your early career, some of this stuff is going to happen. Of course it is. You have to be realistic. But work it out. Is it admin? Is it emails? Is it things that need doing that actually you can put perhaps at the end of the day when maybe you're tired and you're not giving your best brain capacity to it? Where are you going to block out the time for it? Think about what works for you. So hopefully that makes sense, and you can see how we've layered up the diary. I'm not being unrealistic. I haven't planned every minute of this diary. That's not the idea of time management. Time management is about prioritizing and planning and creating awareness. There will be some gaps in your diary if you're managing it well, so that there's some flexibility for things to move around or other things to go in where they need to. So hopefully that's music to your ears, that we're not saying time management is planning every minute of every day. It's not realistic. I would suggest you try doing it for 1 week, and then you'll see what happens, and then you'll have a diary that looks a bit more like this and allows some gaps. So I anticipate at this point, if questions haven't been asked already, and you're very welcome to put questions into the question box, that some may be thinking, well, how do I delegate or say no to some of that stuff that creeps up in box 3? There's a lot of it that comes into the role that I'm doing. And what I'm going to do now is make some suggestions for how to do this. And you can see a great quote from Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, who says, focusing is about saying no. So if you want to be focused, there are ways to say it. Now, these are some very specific responses that you can say that say no without actually using the word no. So they all involve some sort of offering of help or being positive in some way. So I'm just literally going to run through them. So someone asks you to do something that you don't think fits into your box 1 or your box 2, and you think, do you know what, that might be important for you, but it really isn't for me. So I'm going to say to you, actually, I'll look at my diary and I'll come back to you. So you're not saying no, but you're just creating some time and some space to really go and reflect on whether you're going to say yes to that piece of work. You could take that a bit further and say, I'll discuss that with my manager and where that fits into my other priorities, and I'll come back to you and let you know. So again, you're not saying no, you're just stalling for time and making sure that you give yourself the space to reflect on your other priorities before you jump in immediately and feel that social norm to say yes. How about, yes, I can help, and it's going to be on, and you say a date. And deliberately, I don't put a but in there. Yes, I can help, and say when. It might be next week, because that's when it fits into your priorities. And if you do make a statement like that, it could be the person that asks, goes, do you know what, that doesn't fit into my timings. They might find someone else that can do it, or better still, do it themselves, and you haven't had to say no. You could also say, yes, I can help, but we'll need to scale it down too, and it might be that you could restate the size of the work that could fit in, balanced with your other priorities, and you might need time to think about that as well. But rather than doing something that sounds like a 30-page report for someone, you say, I could do that. Actually, what I'm going to be able to deliver, given my other priorities, will be more like 3 pages, but I can do that for you in the time that you want. And they might say, do you know what? given I really do need your help, 3 pages would be okay in this instance. Again, you haven't said no, you've just managed it within your priorities. You could be quite specific with your time. If you're managing your diary that way, you might say, yes, you know, I can dedicate 1 or 2 hours to this. Let's work out what you would like me to do in that time so I can deliver the best result for you in that time I can allocate. Again, you haven't said no, you've just managed it in the time you've got. Some more here, I can help you, but it will need to be on, stating a date and time that does work for you. And then what exactly is it you need me to do? Don't be afraid to push back and be really specific so that you come away from a request conversation really, really clear actually what you've been asked to do, so that you can then reflect on honestly whether you're able to fit it in or not. And then you could ask, who else have you managed to ask? Or is there somewhere else that you could ask? So don't be afraid to push that back on someone. You're probably not the only person that could help with that. And you could ask, have you managed to ask someone else in the team or the cross-functional team? And being honest, really have a think. I fell into this trap a lot, thinking I was the best person to help, but actually someone was being lazy and just asking me because I was sat nearest to them, when actually you might not be the best person to help with that request. So can you say, do you know, honestly, I don't know if I am the best person to help with that. Maybe you could ask whoever in a different department that you genuinely think does have a skill set that can help. So hopefully those are really useful in terms of suggestions, ways of saying no without saying no, and delegating work outwards or downwards or moving it back. So let's think now what we've got to. So where we've come to in this presentation of time management, we've looked at the definitions of time management. We've really thought about why it's a challenge for many of us and what the behaviours are around poor time management. And we've gone through 2 really specific tools that can help with it. So firstly, the Eisenhower urgent versus important matrix, which for some people will be new today, and I guarantee you'll see it a lot more in your career as well if today's the first time, but welcome to it. It is a great tool and it is talked about a lot. And then the second one that will build on that is actually layering up those boxes one at a time into your diary and making that relevant for you. And a thought to leave you with at this point: if you don't plan your own time proactively, others will happily do it for you. And we talked earlier, and you did respond on that being a challenge, that others are quite happy to take your time away for you. So I would encourage you, be proactive with it, be selfish with it, manage it yourself, as if it's your money, it's your own resource.